Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. The main crux of this episode revolves around Percival bringing down plagues, locusts, flies, frogs, and even turning Sweetwater, river into blood and kind of turning all the town water into blood in process. Because it's like, yeah, until they start building my railroad to my ghost train, I'm going to keep bringing down all this biblical stuff on them. And obviously the question is like, well, what are they going to do? I mean, because it's also interesting too, because, right, they've always thought Percival was just, hey, he can read people's mind. Well, not just read people's mind. He could, not read people's mind, take control of people's minds. But now it's like, wait, he has magic on his side too. It's like, yeah, home dude's just kind of, I guess evil isn't limited to just one power. It's like, I mean, we've seen that by Tabitha's time traveling that in some shape or form, he's always been around. Once again, the question is, does evil just manifest itself as Percival and he just goes by different names every so often? Once again, my thought was like, is he supposed to be Lucifer just because Satan was involved in the Riverdale thing? And just this is what he actually looks like and so on and so forth? Or is this just a way, or does just evil's reincarnating, it just happens to look like Percival? They never really went too much into why it is specifically Percival each and every time. So I guess like he's been around long enough to have practiced magic. To the point, while this is all happening, Fangs and Tony want to have their wedding, which, interestingly enough, second time well, not this week, but just, second most recent comic book related wedding, like comic book adapted TV shows, weddings and stuff like that. I won't spoil it if you haven't caught up on something, but something else comic book related recently had a wedding, so I thought the timing was just interesting. But nevertheless, Tony and Fangs are going to have their wedding, and they want Veronica to kind of plan it out, which I think kind of fits, considering Veronica, putting that all together seems like it would be like on and within Veronica's wheelhouse, which we'll get to Veronica's circumstances later. But the fact is that all the while this is happening, Percival's doing his thing, and Cheryl's gift to Tony is to kill Percival, because she's saying like, yeah, why don't we just kill Percival? And it's like, yeah, but if we do that, if we cross that line, that makes us no better than Percival, because it's like, right, this battle of good versus evil, if we give in to evil like that, then it's all a moot point. He kind of wins in the end because we'll give in to evil. But Cheryl tried it anyway. He redirected the spell and hit Nana Rose, which I was like, Jesus. I was like, wait, is Nana Rose about to die? I was like, now they'll probably bandage her up and everything, which they ultimately do, which, jumping ahead a little bit, she does die at the end of the episode, but I don't think that's going to stick. We'll talk about it when we get to the end there, but they want to use Tony and Fang's wedding as something for people to look forward to remind them of what they're fighting for. Which, speaking of, Veronica's trying to figure out what she's fighting for. Tabitha's got Jughead, Betty and Archie have each other, Tony and Fangs have baby Anthony. She's like, what am I fighting for? Because at the end of it all, it's like, right, she was the Wolf of Wall Street, She-Wolf of Wall Street, and now she's still here in Riverdale, and she kind of has nothing. I mean, to be fair, she's got the poison thing under control, because I'm like, oh, I guess that's not really an issue, because she hasn't really been with anyone post kind of getting her poison situation kind of more under control, so she kind of hasn't really been anyone, and I guess that's not really much of an issue anymore anyway, so I guess it's fine. But she's just not sure what she's fighting for. But it's not till later on hanging around Betty that made her realize, like, oh yeah, like, the thing I'm fighting for is my friends. Thank you, B&V forever. Which, like, that song she sung at, for the, like, reception, I thought was kind of wild. Just everyone almost being like, wow. It was almost kind of like a empowerment for sing. It just, at first I was like, doesn't seem quite like a wedding song. And I think that's kind of the point why the reason why it was catching everyone off guard. Like, you know, everyone like, what? What's going on? Why is she picking this song? But I think it's also because Veronica's like, yeah, I'm like, you know. And even she said, like, for the first time in probably forever, she doesn't have anyone by her side. So that complicates things a lot, you know, which you kind of feel bad for Veronica. Especially because it's like, you know, Betty tried to invite, it's like, oh, do you want to be our, like, +2, you know, our +1 to the wedding, me and Archie's, and she appreciated it. It's like, oh yeah, like sophomore year, like we kind of made a splash when we all showed up together like that. She really appreciates it, but she doesn't want to cut into Archie and Betty's time. And based on what she talks to Tabitha about later on, I was wondering, because you could tell it was kind of bothering her, because I was like, yeah, there's a lot of happy couples around, but she really focused on Archie and Betty, and it is that thing of, like, sadly, Archie's never really left Veronica's heart. Because that was also, like, a big complex that Reggie had. He always was comparing himself to Archie because, like, Archie was, I think, that great love. I mean, to be fair, like, Archie and Veronica were together, like, 80% of this show, they've been a couple. Yeah, they've had their issues here and there, but and then there's the 7 years they were apart. But, like, most of the time they were in high school, they were together. So that's also kind of the rub of it. And it's just like, because even she probably thought, like, oh, her and Archie would be in game, to the point she asked Tabitha, it's like, right, you've seen the future. I was like, they're not actually going to give you an answer, are they? And lo and behold, things got interrupted, so we never actually got an answer to it. But Tabitha does know that, so... Because that's always the thing, because I know, like, I think that, I mean, do correct me in the comments down below. I know nothing about the Archie comics, but I feel like that is the thing. Like, I don't know if that's always definitive, like, Archie and Betty and Archie and Veronica. I don't think that's ever definitive. I feel like that probably goes back and forth. I don't know. I could be 100% wrong if that's even a love triangle situation. Because most things I typically see have been of, like, both Archie and Betty and Veronica, like, to get, like, I think he's kind of always torn between the two. Maybe it's like, oh, like, maybe that's always a part of the story of, like, right, before they even start dating, he's kind of caught between, like he was at the beginning of the series, like, oh, obviously he has feelings for Betty, and Betty has feelings for him, but then him and Veronica kind of ended up happening, so him and Betty never happened. But then, obviously, over the course of the series, there's a little moments here and there of them happening, so... And it's going to be interesting to see what the end game looks like in that. And also, time's not set in stone, like, things are complicated. I mean... I don't think we're going to enter a throuple situation. Now, if they wanted to go down that route, I'd be okay with it just because I'm me. Because it's like, hey, no one walks away heartbroken. Because also, like, to me, it's like, once again, it's always my solution. It's a weird example to make. It's always how I want harem situations to get resolved in anime. Yes, you can be like, oh, that's your male brain being like, oh, like a guy surrounded by a woman. It's like, sure, I maybe on some base level is that, but it's also like, I don't want anyone to walk away with their heart broken. But a lot of harem situations in anime and manga typically still end with someone choosing one person despite other people. You know, once again, it's the male fantasy, I'm sure, so on and so forth. But it's just like, yeah, I just want everyone to be together. There's like one manga or anime I've ever come across that kind of dealt with like a, no, let's all be in a relationship together type of thing. But regardless, I don't know if that's the route this is necessarily going to go down. It seems like it's probably going to be a definitive answer of Betty or Veronica. You'd hope it'd be Betty, and you'd think it would be Betty with current circumstances, but you'd also be like, oh, that's heartbreaking. But that also means Veronica might find someone. But the fact that she's asking specifically about it being her and Archie says a lot too. So we'll see where things kind of go on that front. But kind of steering away from all of that. I thought it was interesting that Kevin ended, because at first I was trying to remember, I was like, wait, did something happen to make Kevin shift sides? It's like, no, it seems like that's just this episode thing. I guess with everything that's going on, all the bad stuff, and knowing that Percival's the one who did it, it finally kind of broke. Because it's a combination of, yes, Percival gets inside of people's heads, but he kind of uses their own, like in Kevin's case, his own insecurities against him. So he wasn't mind controlling Kevin as much as he was just using his own insecurities against him. And I guess Kevin just finally, he was like, right, I believed Percival was doing more good for the town than bad. But even he's like, right, but even then it's like, he was just telling me the stuff I wanted to hear, feeding my, insecurities that I think... now he's finally free of it. He even was like, hey, Fangs, Tony, I'm dropping the suit. You can have, I'm full custody of baby Anthony. I won't fight you on this anymore. Even to the point he's also helping out, too. He was going to steal the book that person was writing down, and we have no idea what that's. Maybe it's like an extensive journal, or I don't know, or maybe he's got everything planned out in the book. Who knows? But Kevin wasn't able to get the book. There was a whole situation with the crew, with everything going. Well, the crew wanted to go back to work, but Archie kind of convinced them not to, because him and Tabitha are talking about, like, right, this is for the future, so we just got to hold out a little longer. But Archie wanted to give in when everything really started going sideways, because at the very least, they could start building the railroad slowly, and that would stop. Percival would get what he wants long enough so that no one has to suffer anymore. And Archie was ready to do it, but he inspired the crew too much. And they were like, no, we are going to hold out. Like, don't kind of give up on us yet. Sadly, Percival was like, yeah, screw that. And inflicted everyone with boils. And then he made Archie start building the railroad by himself. But it's like, yeah, you have to, once you reach up to a certain point, then the boils will go away if you worked up to a certain part of the job. And so I was kind of worried about that. I figured Archie wouldn't be able to do everything on his own and complete it. Because even that's in the back of his mind, like, all right, I got to work enough to make sure everyone's okay, but I also can't complete this, because if I do, we're all screwed. But then, like, he starts blotting out the sun, and you're like, okay, cool. Everything that's could go wrong goes wrong. So there's also, like, the Harlot of Babylon thing, which you're like, okay, because that flashback kept happening. I was like, that definitely had to be a Riverdale thing, because even Betty's that's the interesting thing. Like, it's not always 100% clear if other people are getting these flashes or not. When, like, a couple episodes back, when a little bit of the baby Anthony stuff came up, and Tony kind of had a flash of, like, Riverdale stuff, and I'm like, I don't know if she saw that or whether that was just for the audience. It seems like anytime those flashes come up, they're catching a little whiff of it, because most recently it was like, because I think Cheryl kind of got a little bit of that, like, was it last episode or episode before last? But it seemed like it really hit Betty, where she was almost like remembering it, but she doesn't remember it. It's like, well, it's from a different reality that's bleeding over into this one. So why is that happening? Is it because of everything that Percival's doing is kind of all the, like, supernatural stuff he's doing is tearing down the walls between the universes type of thing? Because he is trying to, like, cross over into, like, bringing forth a ghost train. So could that be, like, that's probably messing with the natural order of things. So that wall in between both universes is probably cracking at the same time, bleeding stuff over, which kind of we'll talk about the Jughead stuff soon enough. But, the plant, well, he wanted to get baby Anthony, which I'm like, why is baby Anthony so important? Which is also interesting, too, because that kind of ties into the La Llorona situation. And then there's also the fact is that he also wants to put Betty in the that stock as, like, the Harlot of Babylon, which makes you almost think about, like, well, it almost feels like, not quite, but I wonder if both of those supposed to be almost like the Archie thing in the first episode of Riverdale, where he was kind of sacrificed, which we'll kind of get to that later on too. But, like, baby Anthony, well, because baby Anthony represents the hope of Riverdale. So it's like, yeah, like, that hope, like, you probably need that hope and need to smother it and just kind of, like, it needs to be the ultimate pendulum swing to evil, I guess. Like, by sacrificing this great hope, you're able to bring forth a great evil. So maybe instead, like, so Archie kind of being that originally, like, that's why they took Archie, because he's kind of always been kind of like the hero of Riverdale. Like, but maybe it's like, in this case, we don't need the hero, we need the great hope, and that's baby Anthony. He's special in that regard, or special in other regards, as we see later on, but we'll get to that. But luckily, with the new trick Cheryl learned, they were able to get the the upper hand against Percival, and they locked him up in that stock. And it's supposed to block all powers, but somehow he was still able to summon his locust, who just, like, ate through the wood. So I'm wondering, is that just because, like, it kind of underestimates how, because he may be so old and ancient, that he's more powerful than they give him credit for? Or maybe he just had it kind of, like, still kind of a little, like, even before getting locked up, the little bit of magic he had left was summoning them. So maybe that's all that really was, him just kind of getting out that last little percentage of magic before it was completely locked away from him, just for this purpose right here and now. Either way, him getting free, you're like, oh yeah, this is gonna suck, especially because they're having the wedding and it's beautiful and it's nice. Kevin even got invited. He brought Moose and they put on a performance, and it's just a joyous moment in Riverdale. But you're like, things are about to go south super fast, when in fact he enacts the spell once again by killing Nana Rose, her being the catalyst because she's the oldest first child. And even before things went down, I was like, all right, I started doing the math, not math in my head, but I was like, okay, so Betty should be fine. Because I was an idiot. I completely forgot about Polly, because what was in my mind was Charles. And I was thinking like, well, Charles counts twice because he is both Betty's older brother, but he's also Jughead's older brother. So I thought he would count twice, but Jughead gets affected later. And I'm like, and then I was like, oh, right. So Charles is in that weird spot. He's a technicality. He could be a technicality, but the thing is, it comes down to the mother. Jughead's mom isn't Charles' mom's. Betty's mom is, because at least Betty already had Polly. At least Jughead could have had Charles, but it's like, no, all three of them, Charles, Betty, and Polly, all share the same mom, Alice. So I think that's what that came down to. It's like, right, who your mother is. So Charles is the first son, but I'm like, then, well, Polly's not, wait, Polly's not older than Charles, is she? I don't think she is. Maybe she is. I don't think she is. Because Charles is supposed to be the oldest. I'm like, they didn't bring it up in the episode, because either way, I was like, Charles is going to bite it this episode because of that, right? Because he's not dead, despite last episode when, because he was definitely alive. He's definitely dead now, at the very least, because he's the oldest. Because once again, I guess you would say that would fall to Polly, but I swear Charles is older than Polly, so I don't, maybe Charles isn't as old as I think he is. Either way. I mean, because Polly's already dead, so that wouldn't kind of apply in that case. And the fact is, with Cheryl, even before it got to it, I was like, I'm pretty sure they talked about Jason being the older sibling, despite them being, he's like, yeah, he's the older twin. Turns out he totally is. So I guess like everyone else that survived was like super lucky, but like obviously we know Fangs didn't make it. We know Tony didn't make it, which was very heartbreaking because now Kevin, despite everything, Kevin's like the only person that baby Anthony has left. So everyone else there has like older siblings, because obviously Archie was going to fall because he's the only child. So, and I also start thinking too, because I was like, who amongst Fred and Frank, who's the oldest? Like, would that apply with Alice too? Because I don't. Does Alice have any siblings? Like, wouldn't she be affected as well? I don't, because I'm sure it's allocated to just who's in Riverdale. Because maybe that's what it is. Because maybe Charles isn't in Riverdale anymore. I mean, he wasn't in his episode, but I don't know if he, like, maybe it's only allocated to those in Riverdale. If you're in proximity to Riverdale, you're affected. So I don't know who else that trend. Yeah, because like Veronica has our older half sister too. So, well, no, because then it's like they don't share the same mom. They share they have to share the same dad. So that's why I'm like, why? I mean, not because Jughead's situation, it made it seem like it was something else. I was thinking like he was being affected, but maybe the Charles thing is his technicality. Because I'm about to say, like, yeah, because they have the same dad. Like, that's Veronica and her sister have the same dad, just different moms. So that's why I was like, no, there's something else. If that's keeping Veronica alive, then Jughead should be fine. Okay, I just looked it up because I was driving myself crazy. I was like, I knew I was right. It's like him and FP and Alice. So that's why I was like, not less Jughead's circumstances on his own is what was happening there, but I spent too long on that. But I was just like, man, that was just kind of wild. It's like, wow. And it's just like, oh, you can save everyone. It's like, no, everyone's dead. I mean, you're going to save them, sure. It's like undoing the snap, but it's like still. And then like Heather's like, right, there's someone I know, which I kind of got slightly spoiled on this because I was just like flipping through something. And it's like, saying that Kiernan Shipka was going to come back as Sabrina, which I'm like, I'm glad it's not just a one-off episode thing, but they bring it as this stinger at the end of the episode because Heather's like, I know a necromancer. Because at first I was like, oh, we're going to go back in time because we know Sabrina's dabbled in that. But to be fair, she knows the consequences of that now because this is all post like the Sabrina stuff. So how they'll tie this into the canon of like, we know like, oh, she died and came back to life, which obviously like this is I don't know. Riverdale made it like the story. It's like, oh, the chilling adventures of Sabrina happened, but Sabrina and Nick came back to life at some point in time. Kind of giving the creator Sabrina, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, an opportunity to kind of slightly like add some extra continuity to that, and because didn't get to wrap everything up the way they wanted to. I'm curious if the same element's going to apply when she pops up here in Riverdale. We'll ultimately have to wait and see. You'd assume they're going to be like, oh yeah, this is going to be her after she died. Like, she came back. She'll probably fill them in and be like, oh yeah, Nick is back and everything. We'll see how they ultimately end up playing that out. But like I said, I got slightly spoiled, but I don't care. I'm just like, I'm glad that... once again, I think it's the benefit of like, oh yeah, this Riverdale stuff is super prevalent across the entire season. So there's that. But going over to Jughead, the moment Jughead start talking about like, oh yeah, because she's like, oh, like Tabitha was like, oh yeah, this loud Llorona situation is kind of scaring me, and I was like, wait, isn't that the second story? And it's like, yeah, it was. It's the second story from Riverdale with everything with Baby Anthony and Tony, which I thought was kind of interesting. So at first I was like, oh my god, the stories are coming to life. I was like, oh, that's bad. I was like, are things going to play out the same way? But it never implemented itself like that. Jughead kept waking up and finding the stories missing. Also, he ate the strange Pop's burger that was laid out for him and then kind of fell sick to his stomach. Then Cheryl came to him. It's the Cheryl from the first story who sacrificed Archie, like through the whole ritual and everything. But then his stories kept getting stolen over and over, and someone left a note to tell him keep writing. And the moment he caught himself, it's the Jughead from the other universe, the one from Riverdale writing the stories. So I guess that Jughead, I guess with everything going on, once again, the worlds are bleeding together, so maybe the only thing sustaining his world, like maybe he's got his writer's block, and now, or at the very least, he can't write those stories anymore because now Jughead's mind being what it is, it's basically opened up into this other universe, and he's stealing away everything from that Jughead, so he's writing these stories, but the other Jughead can't write them, and now Rivervale's in danger of no longer existing, and that kind of, once again, I'm assuming it's mainly Percival's presence here and doing all that he's doing is throwing everything out of the balance of everything out of whack. Riverdale is kind of off kilter now because of it. But like I said, then Jughead started going through what he was going through at the end of the episode. I'm like, well, we know Tabitha was on her way, so which Jughead is she going to find? Is she going to find her Jughead or potentially Riverdale's Jughead? So many questions. I'm so excited to see where the Sabrina stuff takes this next episode. I'm just like, just to get more of that, even just a little bit, is going to be nice. Once again, get another episode. I'm assuming that's also going to include bringing back Nana Rose too. So we'll see how that plays out. And when Archie returns, also like obviously the heartbreaking thing for like Betty and Veronica. So the question then becomes like, okay, so potential going to pick up with that answer, probably the answer that Tabitha has in that regard. So, well, because they've also presented like Jughead potentially like revisiting some of his feelings for Betty. So I don't know. I don't know. Because Tabitha must, because we know in some timelines, because the whole thing was Tabitha knows the only timelines where things worked out is if Jughead survived, and that was only 2 of those timelines, and he needed to survive and he needed to have his powers to be this ultimate sacrifice in the grand scheme of things. Well, maybe in this particular case, maybe you could do a little bit of Crisis on Infinite Earths, that Barry Allen has to die during Crisis. Just never said which Barry Allen it had to be. It didn't have to be Earth 1 Barry Allen. It ended up being Earth 99. So, no. Was it 99? It was just 90. Yeah, just Earth 90. So that's when I'm curious if we're gonna have a similar thing here, where it's like it's not gonna be our Jughead, it's gonna be Rivervale's Jughead, but our Jughead is gonna have to fill the void by doing that, or either it is our Jughead and Rivervale's Jughead stays here and becomes the permanent Jughead, and that kind of complicates the dynamic of like, yeah, I'm from a different world. You're always gonna know that, and it's gonna be this weird thing, or maybe only some people would know. Maybe Tabitha would know, but no one else would know. I'm just curious to see how they handle that in the long run. It's going to be very, very interesting. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.